YNW Melly's case could flip completely because his own friend, YNW Bortlen, just made a move that might change everything, and it's shaking the entire hip-hop world. Can you imagine? Your own friend taking a deal that could put you away for life. That's exactly what just happened in YNW Melly's case. When the judge heard Bortlen would only serve 10 years instead of life, he said, "I don't know how your lawyers pulled this off." But here's the twist, it's all bad news for Melly. Loyalty or survival? Which one wins when life sentences are on the line? For YNW Melly, his closest friend's choice may have just sealed his fate. The courtroom has been buzzing with developments in the case tied to YNW Melly and YNW Bortlen. What happened this week could change everything. Bortlen, who was once staring down several life sentences, has officially taken a plea deal. Instead of spending the rest of his life behind bars, he will now serve 10 years in prison followed by 6 years of probation. To many, this is being called one of the most surprising plea deals in recent memory. Even the judge admitted, "I don't know how your lawyers pulled this off." But here's the catch. As part of that agreement, Courtlen Henry, better known as YNW Bortlen, must provide details about what he knows regarding the night of the murders connected to YNW Melly. On paper, he entered a plea of no contest to charges of being an accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence. In simple terms, this means he isn't openly admitting guilt the way someone would with a guilty plea, but he is still accepting the punishment that comes with those charges. What makes this significant is that, by agreeing to such a plea, Bortlen has indirectly acknowledged that a crime took place and that he had some role in covering it up afterward. That small detail carries enormous weight. In a high-profile case like this, the state doesn't just offer deals unless they're confident it will help them achieve something bigger. Prosecutors didn't want Bortlen simply to take a lighter sentence and disappear. They wanted his cooperation. His agreement to tell what he knows about the night Sackchaser and Juvie lost their lives could be the missing piece the state needs to finally pin down Melly. For the defense, this development is a nightmare. Until now, Melly's legal team has argued that the evidence against him is circumstantial, shaky, or incomplete. But with Bortlen stepping forward, that argument becomes harder to maintain. A co-defendant's testimony, especially one who was present during the critical moments of the case, can validate the state's version of events in ways no outside witness could. If Bortlen confirms certain details, it doesn't just strengthen the case, it fills in the gaps that have allowed Melly's lawyers to push back. The irony here is that Bortlen has held out for years. He sat in jail under heavy pressure while prosecutors circled him like sharks. Many people thought he would flip much earlier, but he didn't. That gave Melly and his supporters a kind of false hope, the idea that loyalty might carry them through. But loyalty has limits when you're staring at multiple life sentences. For Bortlen, the choice eventually became stark: spend the rest of his life behind bars or accept 10 years with probation and the possibility of being free in less than a decade. To understand just how drastic this deal is, consider what he was facing before. Without the plea, Bortlen's charges could have easily kept him in prison forever. First-degree felonies, accessory charges tied to a double homicide, and tampering with witnesses carry some of the harshest punishments in Florida's legal system. Prosecutors had the power to bury him under back-to-back life sentences. But instead of pursuing the maximum, they carved out this agreement, a signal to anyone paying attention that their real target is Melly. Even the judge in court couldn't hide his surprise, saying he didn't know how Bortlen's lawyers managed to negotiate something so favorable. But that statement is telling. Judges don't usually marvel at defense deals unless they recognize that something bigger is happening behind the scenes. And in this case, the something bigger is Melly. The hip-hop world has been buzzing ever since the plea was announced. Some fans see it as betrayal, labeling Bortlen a snitch or a rat. Others argue he did what anyone in his position would do, take the lighter sentence and live to see freedom again. Rapper Offset even tweeted about the situation, pointing out the painful reality that Melly's own friend had turned against him. The debate reflects a larger question in rap culture: what matters more, loyalty to your circle or survival in the system? Meanwhile, commentators like DJ Academics have compared the situation to the YSL case, where Ghana accepted a plea deal that required him to admit certain facts without directly testifying against Young Thug. In Bortlen's situation, the dynamic is similar. He doesn't have to point the finger at Melly outright. But by admitting he helped cover up a crime, he validates the state's claim that the crime itself happened and that Melly was connected to it. It's a quieter, more strategic form of cooperation. For Melly, this is devastating. His legal team has already been fighting uphill against delays, retrials, and new charges. The state has been patient, using every postponement to strengthen its case. Now, with Bortlen in their corner, prosecutors can present not just physical evidence, but testimony from someone who was there. In front of a jury, that can be powerful enough to tip the balance. At the same time, it raises emotional questions about trust and friendship. Melly and Bortlen were once close, part of the same crew, making music, living the same dream. To see that relationship collapse in the courtroom is a reminder of how quickly alliances crumble when the stakes are life and death. For the fans watching, it's a real-life story that feels more dramatic than anything in rap lyrics. Looking ahead, the impact of Bortlen's plea deal will play out in Melly's retrial. Prosecutors will almost certainly lean on his cooperation, weaving his admissions into their broader case. The defense will try to downplay his credibility, likely arguing that he only flipped to save himself. That tension will define the trial. Is Bortlen a reliable witness seeking justice, or a desperate man doing whatever it takes to escape life in prison? No matter which side of the debate you fall on, one fact remains: Bortlen's decision changes everything. From multiple life sentences down to 10 years, his deal is not just a legal victory for him, it's a strategic weapon for the state. And for Melly, it could be the difference between walking free one day or never walking free again. This deal has sent shockwaves across the hip-hop world. Fans, lawyers, and even rappers like Offset have reacted online. Some call it snitching, others say he had no choice. Facing multiple life sentences, many believe Bortlen did what anyone in his position would do: take the lighter deal and tell what he knows. Commentators like DJ Academics have been quick to compare Bortlen's decision to what's now known as the Ghana plea in the YSL case. In that situation, Ghana didn't outright testify against Young Thug, but by acknowledging certain facts, he indirectly confirmed the state's narrative. The same idea applies here with Bortlen. He doesn't need to take the stand and say, Melly fired the gun. Instead, by admitting he helped cover up a crime, he validates the state's claim that a crime happened in the first place. And that subtle detail is powerful. For months, Melly's defense has leaned on the argument that the evidence is shaky, circumstantial, or inconclusive. But once someone who is directly involved admits to being part of the aftermath, it changes everything. The jury is no longer just hearing theories from prosecutors, they're hearing confirmation from one of Melly's closest friends. Even if Bortlen never mentions Melly's name, the implication is clear: he wouldn't be covering something up unless there was something to hide. That's exactly why this plea deal is so important to the state. Their eyes have always been on Melly. The prosecutors didn't cut Bortlen's sentence down from multiple life terms to just 10 years because they suddenly felt merciful. They did it because his cooperation could be the missing puzzle piece that ties Melly to the murders beyond reasonable doubt. In simple words, Bortlen's freedom is being traded for Melly's downfall. For fans and the hip-hop community, the situation feels eerily familiar. It sparks the same debate that surrounded Ghana: was this survival or betrayal? Some argue that anyone facing life sentences would take the deal, while others say Bortlen's choice violates the code of loyalty that holds crews together. Regardless of where you stand, the bigger picture is that Bortlen's decision makes Melly's chances of walking free much smaller. At the end of the day, prosecutors don't need him to say much. They just need him to confirm enough to close the gaps in their case. And if that happens, this no contest plea might be remembered as the quiet move that sealed Melly's fate. It's worth noting that this outcome didn't come quickly. Bortlen waited years in jail, holding out as long as possible before agreeing to cooperate. But when you're looking at life sentences stacked one after another, and the state suddenly offers you a way out in less than a decade, the choice becomes brutally clear. Now, the big question is, what will Bortlen actually say? His testimony could either confirm the state's theory against Melly or create even more doubt. Either way, it's a turning point. As one attorney put it, Bortlen is now flipping, and what comes out in his full statement could decide Melly's fate. From the very start, investigators could tell that Courtland Henry, better known as Bortlen, wasn't eager to be part of this case. When questioned, he barely got words out. His body language said it all. He wanted nothing more than to get away from the situation. It didn't look like someone fighting to prove innocence. It looked like someone who just wanted out. At the same time, prosecutors felt confident they were already building a strong case against YNW Melly. They weren't relying on vague theories or gossip. They pointed to evidence they believed directly tied him to the murders. One of the most shocking pieces came from Melly's own digital footprint. Through an online exchange, a message surfaced where Melly's account appeared to casually admit involvement. When someone asked if he was okay, his chilling response was, "I did that," slightly smiling face. A smiley face added at the end, almost mocking the gravity of what was being discussed. For prosecutors, that type of message wasn't just casual talk, it was a self-incriminating statement. Even if Melly's defense tried to argue it was taken out of context, the fact that it existed gave the state a major advantage. Combined with forensic evidence, phone records, and testimony, that simple line added weight to their argument that Melly wasn't just a bystander, he was the one who pulled the trigger. Meanwhile, Bortlen's silence became just as telling as Melly's words. Investigators saw him as someone caught in the middle, too close to walk away, but too nervous to fully fight. His hesitation during questioning hinted that he knew more than he was willing to share. To prosecutors, that made him valuable, not as the main suspect, but as someone who could help fill in the blanks of what really happened that night. This dynamic set the stage for everything that followed. On one side, you had Melly, seemingly confident he could beat the case, even making bold purchases like jewelry while sitting in jail. On the other, you had Bortlen, quietly struggling under the pressure, eventually becoming the piece prosecutors leaned on to strengthen their pursuit of Melly. Together, their actions told two very different stories, but both pointed toward the same dark conclusion. Despite this, Melly seemed confident he would beat the case. Even from behind bars, he acted like a free man, reportedly buying a $100,000 chain while also spending huge amounts of money, some on lawyers, but much of it on jewelry and cars he couldn't even use. Friends questioned his decisions, pointing out that the smartest investment would have been in his defense. Behind the scenes, prosecutors were playing a longer game. Melly's retrial was delayed until 2027, giving the state time to build leverage. One key move was isolating Bortlen from Melly with a strict no-communication order. They couldn't talk to each other, not even through lawyers. That silence allowed the state to quietly push for a plea deal with Bortlen without Melly ever knowing. For the prosecution, keeping both men on trial together was strategic. Tried side by side, they risked turning on each other in front of the jury. For the defense, separating the cases would have allowed each to point the finger at the other. But with Bortlen flipping, the state essentially secured a witness to back up their claims against Melly. What's striking is that Melly himself once tried to shift blame toward Bortlen during the first trial. His own attorney suggested that it was Bortlen who lied to investigators, arrived at the hospital with gunpowder residue on his hands, and misled police about how the shooting unfolded. Forensic experts even testified that residue particles were found on Bortlen's hands. That tension left the two former friends completely estranged. They haven't spoken since. To make matters worse, more trouble followed Bortlen. In 2023, he was arrested again, this time for allegedly tampering with a witness during Melly's trial. Investigators later uncovered handwritten notes in his home, including sketches of jurors and details about where they were seated in court. It looked suspiciously like an attempt to intimidate or track the jury, a discovery that prosecutors seized on immediately. Even though he was later placed on house arrest, that discovery made one thing clear: Bortlen had every reason to cut a deal with the state. By cooperating, he could not only reduce his own punishment, but also help validate new evidence prosecutors want to use against Melly. Reports suggest that includes testimony from an Exoblock member and other fresh details linking Melly to the murders. In short, the writing has been on the wall for years. Bortlen, boxed in by his own mistakes and facing serious prison time, is now positioned to strengthen the state's case against Melly in the retrial. If prosecutors can confirm his cooperation and match it with the new evidence, Melly's chances of walking free grow slimmer by the day. Before his arrest, YNW Melly was close friends with King Von. People in O-Block even recalled Von saying Melly often came to him for advice on handling situations and dealing with people around him. According to those conversations, Melly believed two of his friends were trying to extort him, which created tension in his inner circle. Sign of what really happened that night. Prosecutors also want to link Melly to a bigger picture. They've pulled up social media posts of him with Young Thug, claiming those images tie him to YSL and street gang activity. Phrases, hand signs, and hashtags like YNW for life are now being introduced as evidence. With the retrial delayed until 2027, the state has plenty of time to make all of this usable in court, and if they succeed, it could seal Melly's fate. But here's where the story takes another sharp turn. The reason Melly wasn't convicted in his first trial may have had less to do with evidence and more to do with one missing witness, his ex-girlfriend, Mariah Hamilton. Mariah was ordered to testify in 2023, but before she could take the stand, she fled the country. Without her testimony, prosecutors were left with a weaker case. Recently, however, she returned to the U.S. and was immediately arrested at Miami International Airport. For the first time, Mariah found herself behind bars. In court, the judge gave her a simple choice: testify against Melly and walk free or sit in jail. She agreed to testify on the spot. Her cooperation is dangerous for Melly because investigators claim her iCloud contained evidence showing he pressured her not to take the stand during the first trial. That amounts to witness tampering, a crime that on its own can carry a life sentence. In fact, prosecutors have already filed 6 new charges against Melly and 2 others, including tampering, criminal solicitation, and unlawful use of communication devices. Even if Melly somehow beats the murder case, these new charges could still keep him in prison for the rest of his life. The allegations of tampering don't stop with Mariah. Juvi's father publicly claimed Melly tried to influence multiple people through a chain of coded messages, even using nicknames like Rihanna and Rocky's baby mom to avoid detection. Melly's own mother has spoken out too, criticizing the jail for restricting his phone access and even limiting his ability to read mail. What's clear is that Melly's legal troubles are no longer tied to just one case. He's fighting battles on multiple fronts: the original double murder charges, the possibility of his closest friend flipping against him, and now fresh charges of tampering that could bring life in prison regardless of the murder trial's outcome. Inside Broward County Jail, YNW Melly's situation has raised serious concerns. Other inmates, even those already convicted, are allowed to make phone calls, write letters, and receive mail. But Melly has been cut off. His letters are held back, and his phone privileges were taken away completely. The only reason the jail would enforce such harsh restrictions is if they had solid proof of wrongdoing. According to reports, federal authorities are convinced Melly was using the jail phone to tamper with witnesses. If this was just a suspicion, it could open the county to lawsuits worth millions. The fact that the restrictions remain in place shows they likely have the evidence to back it up. For Melly's mother, Jamie King, this has been devastating. She's spoken openly about how it feels to watch her son being treated this way, saying he's scared for his life and feels broken. In her words, it's heartbreaking to see him stripped of even basic rights. She's tried to challenge the jail's actions in court, but officials argue they set their own rules, leaving families with no clear path to fight back. The story quickly spread online and sparked strong reactions. Charleston White, never one to hold back, argued that Melly deserves no sympathy. He claimed Melly shouldn't expect special treatment just because he's a celebrity, adding that someone accused of taking lives has no right to complain about mistreatment in jail. But not everyone agreed. Rapper Boosie came forward to support Jamie King, saying he met her while Melly was incarcerated and was struck by her pain. He described her as genuine and deeply stressed, comparing her struggles to what his own mother went through when he was locked up. For him, seeing Melly's mom reminded him of the toll prison takes not only on inmates, but on the families left behind.